Good afternoon. This is Chris Zimmerman from Smart Growth America in Washington, D.C., and welcome to our webcast. Thanks for joining us. We'll be talking about the small-scale manufacturing technical assistance grants that we will be awarding, and over the course of the next 59 minutes or so, giving a little information about the project, the program, and the application process, and then we'll be happy to take questions and answers. If you are, I'm sure many people have questions already, and the good news is you don't have to wait. You can start sending them to us using the Q&A facility that is part of the ReadyTalk software that you're using at the moment. And if you put in your questions, we're going to try to get to as many of them as we can when we get to the Q&A section. We'll try to get to others later that we're not able to get to today and provide later answers. I should also say that this webcast is being recorded and will be posted subsequently. So if you wanted to go back and check something, or even more importantly, if there's somebody who didn't have the opportunity to tune in at this time, they'll be able to access it and get the same information. So with that, let me start by saying again, my name is Chris Zimmerman, and I'm with Smart Growth America, which is administering this program. And with me, who you'll also be hearing from, is our partner in this project, Alana Prus of Recast City. Also here, Bernadette Grafton with the U.S. Economic Development Administration, and they are the principal funder for this project. And we're grateful to have their support, which is the second round. We, as some of you may know, did this in the previous year, where we were able to offer assistance to 4 different communities. This time we'll be able to offer it to 6 with the support of EDA. So with that, let me turn it to Bernadette for a few words from the Economic Development Administration.
Great. Thank you, Chris. So as you said, my name is Bernadette Grafton. One of the many things I do at EDA is work with our Research and National Technical Assistance Program, which I'll talk about, but I first just want to briefly talk about EDA a little bit. So EDA's mission is to lead the federal economic development agenda by promoting innovation and competitiveness, preparing American regions for growth and success in the worldwide economy. So EDA is guided by the basic principle that sustainable economic development should be locally driven, and our programs leverage these existing regional assets to support implementation strategies across the U.S. So really, what is economic development? EDA defines it as the expansion of capacities that contribute to the advancement of society. There's a sustained increase in prosperity and quality of life, and economic development is essential to creating conditions for economic growth and ensuring our economic future. EDA provides competitive merit-based grants and technical assistance to economically distressed communities. We have distress criteria that have to be met for our meat and potatoes that EDA has, which is our public works or economic adjustment assistance program. So these criteria are unemployment rate that's at least 1% or greater than the national average, or per capita income that's 80% or less than the national average. We invest in long-term investments such as infrastructure, high-risk innovation projects. Our investments require match, most often about 50%, and our grantees leverage private sector investment. We really focus on that public-private cooperation, and that's where many of our investments thrive. But we also have smaller programs like the research and evaluation and technical assistance that have a national impact. And that's how this project is being funded, is through our Research and National Technical Assistance Program. This is technical assistance projects that are national in scope. There's a very broad scope of these types of projects that we fund. But the key thing is that distress criteria are not applicable here. So any community is able to participate as long as it kind of falls within the scope of the project. You can find out more about our program at the website here on this slide. But to briefly give you an example of some of our projects, we've touched disaster mitigation, program evaluation, and performance metrics. research on regional economic development theory. We've developed tools for economic developers and communities. Stats America is one of the most successful projects that RNTA has had. If you visit statsamerica.org, there's a ton of resources there that many communities have found to be extremely helpful. And we're constantly updating that and developing new tools and resources for communities. We have 6 regions across the United States, all pictured here. Just to give you an idea of kind of where we operate, we have regional offices in each, and our website will give you some contact information for each of these regional offices to learn a little bit more about the programs that are available. So that is it.
Thank you, Bernadette. So let me talk a little bit about who we are and why we're doing this. Again, the 2 principal organizations involved in delivering this technical assistance are Smart Growth America. We are a national nonprofit. We work all around the country, and among the things we do is provide technical assistance to communities in a wide range of areas involving land use, community design, efficient transportation, and so on. And particularly trying to focus on locally driven development solutions, working with communities on smart growth solutions. And that's part of where this fits in for us, which I'll say a little bit more of in a moment. As I said, we have our partner in this, Recast City, which is a consulting practice that focuses specifically on this particular topic. And you'll be hearing more from Alana Preuss in just a few moments. Let me say a little bit about, in a little slightly more detail about why we're doing this, why we're in this. We're particularly, as Smart Growth America, interested in small manufacturing as a way to grow local entrepreneurship and small businesses, to help what in many cases is a new sector. In some places this may be an existing sector of small manufacturing. In some cases it's an existing sector that people aren't really aware they have, but want to find out about how better to strengthen and utilize as part of a solution for revitalizing a downtown existing business district, or in some cases creating a new one. We're looking at this as an opportunity to meet part of an overall challenge of economic development in an era in which local communities are finding more and more that downtowns, old and new, are a key to successful economic development, as opposed to much of the 20th century where it was pretty much all about greenfield development, and we were building places brand new out where there was a new entrance to a highway. In the 21st century, we're finding more and more that the key is walkable communities, and many of the best candidates are existing main streets and downtowns that may have been successful in the past and may or may not have been successful in the recent past, but now have new opportunities. But there are challenges, and to a large degree, that's a matter of placemaking and a matter of trying to fill out, how do you make this a vibrant place, whether or not it has been recently, or how do you keep it as a vibrant place, and whether it's a big downtown or a neighborhood center, a small town center. How do we take advantage of the opportunities here? And among the challenges that places face today are the need to fill storefronts in an era in which retail is more challenging, and you can't fill everything with restaurants. You need some other elements in the mix. And small-scale manufacturing can create an opportunity for a new and different kind of downtown excitement. It can be inspirational. It can attract new entrepreneurship. It can take advantage of local skills and provide new opportunities immediately in the locality while contributing to place-based economic development. And that's pretty much the main reason why we think this is such an important part of the local economic development and promoting smarter growth. I'm going to turn now to Alana Preuss, who will tell you a little bit more about this sector, what's going on, why it's important, and how it works, and what we'll be doing in the upcoming technical assistance. Alana.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris. I'm excited to talk through all of these pieces with everyone. My name, as you heard, is Alana Preuss, and I am the founder and CEO of the consulting firm Recast City. Recast City works with cities and counties and foundations and all different kinds of civic leaders all over the country to bring small-scale manufacturing into neighborhood redevelopment projects, and really building a bridge between economic development and place investment and real estate. And our focus is on exactly this. What is small-scale manufacturing? So if you're going to pursue one of these technical assistance projects, it's obviously very helpful to know exactly what we're talking about when we talk about small-scale manufacturing. So it's not only a small business that produces a tangible good, and it is material agnostic, right? So it could be something that's high-tech with 3D printing and robotics, or it could be food production, or it could be textiles and hardware prototyping of any kind. But the important part is that these are businesses that are between 1 and 50 people, and so they can fit into the fabric of our neighborhoods, which is a key part of this. Many of these businesses are already found in our cities and towns all over the country. Even if you don't think they're there, they're there. These are businesses, in many cases, built on the skills that are inherent in our communities, and these are built off of skills that people have been learning from being involved in things like the maker movement, or where they started a business on Etsy and have scaled into a full-time business. These businesses, as we said, are small, but they're selling nationally and internationally overnight. They're paying higher wages, often 50 to 100% more than service or retail jobs. So in a community that's really looking at how do we help more people afford a better quality of life, this is the key piece to that solution. And then we have all of these platforms online that are helping businesses scale. So it might be selling more of their products to more people through wholesale, or it might be helping them source their products by finding contract manufacturers who might be able to produce some of their projects at 100 at a time instead of 5 or 10 at a time. So it's helping these small-scale manufacturers scale regardless of where they are. And one of the exciting things is that we see businesses that can be the face of our neighborhood, that can be part of the fabric of our neighborhood and help us create great places. They might be selling at a booth like this at a festival. They might also be selling in a retail front where they are also doing some of their production. They might be selling wholesale online, and they might be subcontracting out to contract manufacturers for some of their production. So their economic impact and their place impact is really significant. What I'm going to do is very briefly walk you through a few examples of who are these businesses, just so that you have a clear sense of what to look for if you haven't found them yet in your community. So some of them are going to be part-time startups, and some of them are full-time. They might be in their own space, or they might be in a shared workshop. So a shared commercial kitchen is a great place to find these businesses, as well as in micro enterprise or micro retail spaces. And then we also have businesses that are often referred to as artisan businesses, craft or maker industries. These are businesses between 1 and 5 employees. They might have recently scaled out of their home and be leasing their own space. They're often doing both retail and wholesale, in-person, online, with multiple revenue sources. And then we have folks that are starting to go from prototyping to scaling production. So the prototyping might be folks creating consumer kitchen products where they're prototyping the 3D printing on site, but they're actually having the large-scale production help elsewhere. Or scaled production, this is a screen printing company where they can do, I think they could do 40 or 50 shirts at a time, which is a pretty high production level still for local high-quality screen printing. And then we obviously have folks that are getting a lot bigger. A lot of the breweries and distilleries or some of the larger food production spaces, they may still only have 50 employees, but they start using a much larger footprint because they end up being spaces that are not just from production, but also for community gathering spaces. And one of the interesting things to think about as we look across communities to find these businesses is that we find business owners across every different demographic in our community, so that we really can build a community of business owners that reflects the demographics of our community and lift all of them up. These businesses are helping address a number of different trends that many of our communities are facing. We have a weakening retail and office market in many communities. Even in areas that might have a hot retail or office market in one part of their market, a lot of other parts of the market are pretty weak or weakening. And so this is a kind of business that can occupy these spaces and bring life to those streets. We also have a lot of communities with very, very painful and slow approval processes. So where we can leave properties and target locations as industrial or allow small-scale manufacturing or artisan manufacturing as an allowable use in our commercial areas that might need some love, then we make it by right to be able to have these kinds of businesses in target locations. We also have a great potential for self-revitalization. Commercial gentrification and commercial displacement is becoming a significant challenge in a lot of communities all over the country. And when we're looking at spaces and economic development opportunities to support these businesses and keep them in our community, we're really looking at how are we building up wealth from within our neighborhoods, from within our communities, through a process of self-revitalization. Obviously, the need for middle-income jobs is something that we see all over the country. These businesses mostly pay 50 to 100% more than retail and service jobs, and this is a key step for increasing middle-income jobs. And then the last point that I want to leave everyone with is really to think about how these businesses can spark neighborhood energy. From my work from north to south and east to west in this country, working with communities, it is amazing to see how proud neighborhoods are and how proud different communities are of really showcasing their local businesses and especially of locally produced products and businesses that are doing production. It is really a reflection of their history and it's a reflection of their future, and it's this inspiring opportunity to not only bring a community together but really rebuild economic opportunity and economic development in a different way. So the assistance projects, I'm just going to touch on this very briefly and then hand it back to Chris to talk about this in more detail. Every applicant will apply for a project. As Chris said, we're going to award one in each of the 6 EDA regions. Each recipient is going to receive a 4-month project working with Recast City and Smart Growth America. Through this project, we're going to work with you to engage local leaders, small-scale manufacturing business owners, and your real estate community. And our goal is to really focus in to address major placemaking and economic development challenges that we can solve with bringing small-scale manufacturing to the table. The 4-month project will include a team site visit and a series of workshops inside the community while we're there. And the outcome is to create a custom action plan to jumpstart your work. We were not going to be providing some study that's going to sit on the shelf. We are all about making sure that you have the right people at the table to really help you jumpstart your work and really move forward very quickly. And with that, Chris is going to talk about the details.
Thank you, Ilana. So if you're interested, now's the time to apply. Applications are open now. They're due by 5 p.m. on June 29th. We'll be then scoring them and notifying the winners sometime in the neighborhood of August 1st. And then we'll, of course, begin the actual delivery of the technical assistance, which will occur basically from 12 to 14 months of selection. And we'll work with those who are selected to schedule the overall work. You can submit simply by going to the website and using the link. You'll get the application. You can fill it in right online, and that is the best way to do it. If you need to, you can also download it as a PDF, and if you need to, you can send it back to us. All that's available on the website at, as you can see on the screen, smartgrowthamerica.org/manufacturing. Those who are eligible include local governments, regional governments, tribal governments, nonprofits and NGOs. The main thing, though, that we want to emphasize is that whoever's applying needs to have commitment from the local political leadership. So in particular, as demonstrated, let's say, through the chief elected official. But the intention is that there's some commitment from the policymakers in the community to participate to some degree and to carry out whatever comes out of this, because the idea, as Ilana said, is to actually have something that doesn't sit on a shelf, but will go forward as an action plan and help your community. That's why we're asking for this letter of commitment. which would come with the signature of the chief elected official, whoever that may be in your community. And again, I'm trying to emphasize that this is more than perfunctory. The idea is that we want you to know that you actually have an interested leadership in your community who, once you've won this award and we go through the effort over that 3 or 4 month period, that you have an action plan that somebody's going to want to run with, and something actually can be done. So let me say just a little bit about the selection criteria. There are 5 major criteria, and you'll see these if you look at the application that's online. They're spelled out, and specific points are made about each of them. One is that there's a demonstration of interest in small-scale manufacturing as an element of place-based economic development. The second has to do with your need and what it is you want to do with this, which may mean your community's already got something started, but you want to go to a new level. It may be you're only just starting out, but the point is to explain how it is you would benefit from the technical assistance and how that would result in some action. So there's preference given, as is indicated in the application, to some kind of defined project or initiative that itself spells out the kind of outcomes, the benefits to the community that you're trying to achieve, and understanding of who in the community will benefit from the work. The third one is partnership and engagement, and again, the success in this area, as I think Alana alluded to, requires a fair amount of cooperation across, for instance, different agencies within government or across governments and in and out of government. And you want to be able to show that you have a range of stakeholders that are engaged and will be participating in the process. The fourth criteria is commitment to equity, and we want to be sure, and we want you to be able to show that assistance is going to keep in mind the effect on existing residents, for instance, and look to minimize displacement of current residents or businesses, perhaps expand access to opportunities for people all across the community. And then finally, again, leadership, and I started with this, I'm come back to this again. It's demonstrating that there's a commitment of leadership in the community that will be making the key policy decisions afterwards to moving forward on this kind of project. Again, as was mentioned earlier, there are 6 EDA regions, and we have 6 awards, so basically it's going to be one from each region. There are sort of secondary criteria after the first 5, so scoring is going to be made on the basis of those 5 criteria I went through, but then we'll look at issues of diversity, including diversity in the broader geographic sense and diversity among types of communities and so on, sizes, economic conditions, populations, so it'll be a broad range. And then, of course, we should not forget that there's a deadline. We've said it a few times, but I'll say it again. 5 o'clock Eastern Time, June 29th. That's Eastern Daylight Time. So, you still have some time, but I wouldn't want to be pushing that trigger at 4:59 myself and then find something goes wrong with the computer. So, because we're not going to look at applications that we don't receive by that time. Applications must be complete, or we're not going to go through them. And again, you can submit them through the online portal, or you can mail the PDF. You can email it to info@smartgrowthamerica.org. Just before we go to Q&A, let me note again that this presentation will be posted online, so you can refer back or refer others who didn't get to hear it. And of course, we'll be letting people know that it's available for those who want to hear it and learn whatever they can before the deadline for the applications. And with that, I think we should go to questions and answers. And Sean here in the room with us has been looking over the questions. And do you have a first question for us to start with?
Yeah, I think the first one, we can talk a little bit more about who's eligible to apply. There was a specific question about 501c6s versus C4s, but I think if we could just expand upon that a little bit more for the people listening.
Bernadette, can you speak to 501c6 versus C4? I'm not sure that that's a factor for us.
No, we have no restrictions in terms of who is eligible and not eligible on this?
So it's pretty broad. I mean, I would say if it's a community-based group, again, the criteria says, you have to demonstrate these things that are in the 5 criteria. So, if you're able to show that you're engaged with the stakeholders, you have the support of stakeholders and you have the support of the leadership in the community, then we'd certainly review such an application and, can consider it like any other.
Great. And then there's a specific question about funding construction design costs. Do we do any sort of work on that?
This program does not involve direct funding of any kind of construction. It's strictly an award of technical assistance. All
right. We've also gotten a couple questions about financial commitments required from municipalities or anybody.
No, this is if you win it, you get it, and the only kind of expenditure at the local level for participating in this will be like local staff time, for instance. We may ask you to identify a venue for meetings and things like that, but there's no cash. You don't have to pay us for anything.
And then also, is this a recurring grant? People are asking, they may not be ready just now for this technical assistance, but is there going to be opportunities in the future?
Well, we at SGA would very much like for it to be. It's recurred once now, and I think it's something, since there was a great deal of interest, and given what we've already seen with people who signed up for today, that it seems there is much interest. We certainly hope we will be able to offer future rounds. However, I can't say at this time that we're funded for that, and we'll have to see how things go. So I can't promise anything other than that SGA will seek to try to continue to meet the obvious demand for this kind of program.
We also have some people online from some relatively smaller towns and cities. Do we provide assistance to those smaller cities?
Very much so. As I said, we're looking for a range of different sizes of communities, and in the past, with both the first round of this program as well as similar programs that we've done, we've worked with many different communities of many different sizes. I think the smallest community we worked with in the last 2 years had a population of 800. Now, in this program, we worked with communities that ranged from, about 100,000 was maybe the largest, to 20,000, something like that. So, I mean, the short answer is yes, absolutely. There's any size is good, and we are in fact going to look to serve a range of communities of different scales.
So also, could development regulations that encourage this type of small-scale manufacturing be part of the final product the action plan that we're delivering to cities?
I can give a short answer to that, but I think, Ilana, if you're there, maybe you want to address this one.
Sure. The answer is absolutely. This technical assistance can help communities with a development ordinance. It can help with any kind of permitting and other regulations within the community that a jurisdiction might want to do to streamline their development process or redevelopment process to benefit small-scale manufacturing. All of that kind of policy work is absolutely qualified. Also, folks who want to look at it from a real estate development perspective and bring in the private sector as well as the business sector of how do we support and expand it, and where would you want to put it. That locational work is also absolutely in the pot.
Very good.
Great. And then we've also got a couple questions just about previous applications, how can we get in touch for more information, where should people be reaching out if they have questions?
And Sean, I think you know the answer to that.
I do. info@smartgrowthamerica is going to be the best way to get in touch with us. Send us your questions that way, and we can get back to you on those.
As well as the website itself, of course, which has information and which will have this posted onto it and potentially any other information that becomes relevant along the way.
That is correct. And then would you prefer to see one letter support from elected officials, or having more people on this letter? Is that something that we would prefer?
I would say that it's important that you have the chief elected official's signature on something. If there are other ways to demonstrate that you have the support of the leadership in the community, that could help. Because again, what we're really looking for is the indication that there are people who are going to be making decisions about this, who are interested in this, who want to participate, and would be inclined to do something with whatever you and we produce.
We've got a lot more great questions. One from somebody who's working with a specific neighborhood organization. Can this TA go specifically to one neighborhood, or is it at the municipal level?
So I'd say that kind of depends, and let Bernadette and Ilana may have thoughts on this too. Again, I think that the main unit of government is relevant here. So if something is on a neighborhood or sector, a part of town where the focus is, that's fine, because I think it's good for places to have a focus where they want to do something. But it also has to have support from the relevant folks. So communities are organized in different ways, but if your community is governed, for instance, like a city where, let's say, there's a mayor and council and they're going to make policy-wide decisions on a citywide basis, then that has to figure into this. Even though the project itself isn't necessarily something that's going to take place everywhere, in all likelihood it's going to take place somewhere, and some specific focus, as I said, is generally a good thing. Brenda, do you have other thoughts on this?
I would absolutely agree. There are definitely cases where it would make sense to have multiple neighborhoods impacted by this project, so you shouldn't feel like you have to restrict it to one neighborhood, but there should be a key focus area in your proposal.
So to give an example, there might be in your community an organization that's focused on, let's say downtown, and they might be the entity. That might be the entity that wants to apply for this and focus it in that area, and that can work. Or it could be adjacent to downtown, but there's some kind of organized, a recognized district, an organization that works with that, as long as it has the support at the municipal level or county level or whatever the relevant unit of government is. Ilana, did I miss anything?
No, I think that's exactly right. I love it when we have a target neighborhood to focus on, but there's always lessons to be learned that can be applied in other parts of the community. But I do think it's important to be able to have at least some kind of location or neighborhood where you really want to test out detailed questions for your project.
Great. And then we're getting a lot of questions just about the specific nature of what the technical assistance entails, both that and then what do the outcomes look like? What is in this action plan that we're going to be delivering to communities?
Ilana, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So with each community that is selected, we work with you to create a leadership team within your community that is going to work with us to make the entire thing happen. We do regular calls with the team to understand who are the key stakeholders to be involved. In that part of it is really custom to each community. Who are both the people from the political side, from the small-scale manufacturing side, as well as community leaders and property owners that need to be at the table. We really work with you from the very beginning to figure out who needs to be at the table at the start to help you be able to implement the plans at the end, the strategies at the end. We work together over about 3 months to refine that outreach, as well as to create an agenda for our team site visit, where we will work with you to come to the community and meet with as many of those identified people as possible. We will work with you to co-host a public meeting if that's what you're interested in doing, or a meeting targeted to small-scale producers in your community, your real estate development community, whichever subsectors you have worked with us to identify as key to this. We'll do a site tour, and we'll do a workshop with you to make sure that people really understand what are the opportunities around this kind of economic and real estate development within your community. Throughout that whole process, we'll do a lot of data gathering also, both while we're on site and before we come on site, to understand what's going on. And then out of all of that information, we provide you with an action plan. And the action plan is really based on what we heard in the community, what we think is going to have the strongest legs in your community, as well as what are some of the best practices that have worked very successfully in other communities across the country. With my work in Recast City, I have the opportunity to constantly be collecting all of these best practices from other communities. And so we bring that to each site to figure out which ones are really best for that place, because we know no two communities are exactly alike, but everybody has something in common that might work. And so we want to make sure we're setting you up for success to be able to implement it afterwards. And then we get you that action plan, and you get to run with it and make it happen. And we'll check in with you from time to time over the many months after that to see how you're doing on implementation. But that implementation work is really owned by the community itself.
Very good.
Great, thank you. I've also gotten a question, what level of engagement should the actual small-scale manufacturers have in these applications?
What level of engagement? Go ahead, Ilana.
The small-scale manufacturers, we know they're running their own businesses and don't have that much extra time. And so part of what we do is work with the community to do interviews or small group meetings with the small-scale manufacturers in the community. We do want to understand the opportunities and barriers that they see within the community, but we don't want to take up too much of their time because, as you all know, they're often a solo person running a business, or they're one person running a small business, which means they have 17 different hats. So we work to be very respectful of their time and of their engagement. That being said, if there are small-scale manufacturers in the community who want to be very involved in the project, we certainly welcome their participation.
So I think that, from what Ilana said, there's a balance between recognizing that these are people who typically don't have a whole lot of time, and at the same time, their participation to one degree or another is clearly beneficial to making this a good project.
Great. And then we mentioned earlier, talking about the timeline, that we'll be actually doing the workshops, the visits, it's in the next 12 to 14 months. Some people are wondering if that can happen even sooner. What do we have to say about that?
Well, I don't know, sooner than, I meant so let me just step back. We'll be announcing the winners on or about August 1st, and we'll immediately engage those who were selected and begin to plan out when we would, begin the engagement in each community. So, yes, we'll probably be starting in the fall, maybe in September, right away with some folks. We won't necessarily be able to do everyone all at the same moment, but we will be beginning to schedule them as soon as possible. So the engagement will begin, we expect not long after that, and we certainly will be directly contacting all the selected communities to, start this process in the time, within 30 days of the announcement, I'd say.
All right, and then there's also a lot of interest in actually seeing the specific outcomes from some of our last round of TA. Can we talk a little bit about the outcomes that we're actually seeing in the communities?
Well, one thing is that there was a report done at the end of that called Made in Place, and that is available on our website, and that would be a good first place to have a look because we did summarize the work in those communities, and that gives you some kind of idea. Ilana, can you want to say anything about some of the highlights of the work previously and what people are doing in those communities that we've worked in before?
Sure. I know that your blog also has short profiles on each of the places that we went on the last round of assistance. So the communities that got the assistance last time are Knoxville, Tennessee, Lowell, Massachusetts, Twin Falls, Idaho, and
Ohio.
Why am I forgetting? Youngstown, Ohio. Youngstown, Ohio. And in each case, they had picked a neighborhood. It wasn't necessarily their downtown. A neighborhood that they wanted to target for small-scale manufacturing growth. And some of them had other pieces that they wanted to look at. Twin Falls had more of a workforce development growth angle to theirs. Lowell had much more of a perspective of planning ahead for both building more of an inclusive an equitable business owner community and planning ahead so that they wouldn't be creating commercial displacement of an immigrant population business community. Youngstown was really focused on their downtown and catalyzing that, and Knoxville was much more focused on a downtown adjacent neighborhood that historically was a manufacturing center, and really looking at how to bridge the gap between neighborhoods in that area and harnessing the energy around producers in that community. They each have moved ahead in completely different and unique ways. I'll just give you a couple of examples. Based on our work in Lowell, the city council immediately created a diversity task force at the city council level to really make sure that they had the voices of all of the different populations in the city at the table with the city council, and that they've worked to really promote a number of their grant and loan programs that they already had. They worked to promote them very specifically to the small-scale production and to the immigrant-owned small-scale production businesses in particular. Knoxville, Tennessee, really ran with the recommendations and has now launched themselves into becoming, they've branded themselves as the Maker City, and they have a whole online directory of their small-scale production businesses and have expanded the programming and are looking at creating more space in the target neighborhood for those businesses. That's just two examples of the ways that they've started to implement some of the recommendations. The recommendations that we give each community span both from really short-term, things you can move on in the first 3 months, to things you can do that it'll take you a year or so to really implement. So we try to make sure that there's a way to build capacity for both short-term and long-term implementation.
And just to follow up on that, I think that's always a feature of the action plans we try to work with people to create, that you need some things to show progress right away. That's really important to build momentum and maintain it. But some things will take a little bit longer. And then there are some long-term things, and you need those to be really meaningful as well. So we're sort of looking for, more near-term, middle-term, and long-term kinds of activities that you can get a start on. And we will, in conjunction with that, also be asking folks to, be able to give us a little bit report back afterwards. After we leave, we'll want to hear at, certain intervals kind of what you're doing, just so we can keep track of how's it going and, what people are having success with, what they're struggling with, and, how things are working out. You have another question, Sean?
Yes. I'll just say, again, we've gotten a lot of great questions. If you have more, they haven't been answered yet, put them in the text box in the bottom left of your screen, and we can get to those with the time we have remaining. But we've gotten a question about, some communities seem to already be a little bit further along. They have an action plan. Does this TA, could it be used to put this action plan in place? And I think just kind of broadly, can we talk a little bit more about, the types of communities that can apply, like where they're at? Maybe they're completely new to this. Maybe they're a little further along like this.
I'll start with that, and then Alana may want to add something. But, as with the first round, we're interested in communities that may be at different stages in looking at this. We'd like to see something that there's some evidence that, there's been interest and some work done, some idea of where you want to go. But we also recognize that for some communities they may be really early along on this, and others may be farther along the path. And the key thing is, do you know where you are? Do you know where you want to go? And do you have some idea of what the next level is that you're trying to get to? I think we're looking to help people, who may be starting out at different places, but the main thing is, can we help you get from wherever you are to the next level? Alana, you want to add to that?
Absolutely. I completely agree. We'd love applicants who are all along the continuum. So if you already have your action plan and you're already moving it forward, but there's some piece of it that you're really struggling with, or some piece of it that you really want to bring in some outside expertise on, you can certainly apply for that. Just remember that the application is for the technical assistance. It's not a grant program. So Smart Growth America isn't giving out funding for plan implementation. It's about building a team that we will bring to your community and work with you on whatever that implementation is. So please feel free to apply for any kind of specific implementation that you are pursuing in relation to this topic as well.
Well said.
Yep. Great. And then can we just, or do we have a definition, I guess, for downtowns or like core neighborhoods? Like, what do we mean by that when we say that?
I'll start, and again, if Alana or Bernadette have thoughts on this, feel free. I would say that we are using the terms deliberately, loosely, and broadly, because they may mean different things in different places. In some places it might be a central business district, but it need not be. But there is some idea of centrality here, some idea that there's a locus of activity that we're looking to work on enhancing. But it is meant to be broad so that what fits your community can be the basis for the work.
Well said. I wouldn't add anything to that.
Alana?
Yeah, that sounds good.
And then we've also gotten a question, is this, our TA will address, actually making the conditions right for small-scale manufacturing, but could this also act as a catalyst for, bringing more people into the space, entrepreneurs who are looking at starting their own business in a community?
That is, in fact, part of the reason why we think this is a good thing. There's a direct effect working with small-scale manufacturers, but we very much see this as a potentially catalytic activity for communities. And so, the hope is that ultimately it will have precisely that kind of effect more broadly for the community.
Great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think those were basically all of the questions that we've received at this point. I would just...
I'm sorry, if people do have questions after this, tell them again what they should do.
You should go to our website, smartgrowthamerica.org/manufacturing. You can find the applications there. If you still have questions that aren't answered there or through this webinar, you can email us at info@smartgrowthamerica.org.
Let's say that one more time. If you have questions, and I think you can see on your screen right now, info@smartgrowthamerica.org. Feel free to submit questions there. Are there any other information we need to share with people before we go? Alana, anything on your end?
No, I think we're good. I'm excited to see all of the applications come in, and please feel free to use the Made in Place report as a resource, as well as recastcity.com for other resources as well.
Thank you, Alana. Thank you, Bernadette.
Absolutely.
And we look forward to seeing your applications. Have a good afternoon.